Next up, it's AIM-listed Poolbeg Pharma, the clinical stage infectious disease pharmaceutical company which operates a capital-light clinical model. Poolbeg is targeting the growing infectious disease market, and its flagship product, POLB 001, published strong results from the first clinical trial early in January, and Poolbeg believe it has the potential to become a leading severe influenza treatment. Tonight, we're delighted to be joined by CEO Jeremy Skillington, as well as Business Development VP David English. Welcome to you both.
Very nice to be here again, Donald. Good to see you.
Greetings, gentlemen, and how are you this evening? Are you coming to me live from Dublin?
We are indeed. A dark Dublin. The night's getting longer, but it's dark right now, yeah.
But we're on the sunny upside. We're looking forward to the sunlit uplands very shortly, Jeremy.
Lovely.
Right, now who's starting off? I understand it's you, Jeremy. You're going to...
I will start off, and I must say before I get going, I'll give the company updates going through, but I'm just delighted that number one, David English joins me here tonight, but number two, the fact that he's joined the company. He brings tremendous experience on the business development front. So again, delighted David can join tonight, and he's going to go through more of the realizing value through business development, which is a core focus, a core area of growth for Poolbeg after we've now established our pipeline. But for those not in the know, as it were, I'll go through and just give the general background to the company. We're a leading biopharma company specializing in infectious disease. We used to be focused, but we've done a few, deals in adjacencies that we see will be quite beneficial for shareholders, and I'll speak about those very shortly. But those who know, we plan to be a one-stop shop for pharma who look for programs to in-license. So we're going to provide a pipeline for pharma to add to their own internal pipelines to drive their programs forward. We spun out of our colleagues at hVivo, who are, a respiratory viral focused clinical trials company. Spinning out in 2021, we raised 25 million, and we're fully funded. I know we said in the last call that we have funding to keep us going to get us to deal readiness, let's say deal transactions. So again, we run clinical trials. We're clinical trial focused, and as you see, a lot of these clinical trials can be run very, very quickly, very cost efficiently. So we'll talk about those later on. But targeting large addressable markets, even beyond infectious diseases. And I'll speak about our cancer programs and our diabetes and obesity programs later on, but in brief. But so again, early out-licensing is the goal. So we're looking to generate early human clinical data and then begin partnering with pharma. And those conversations are already started and ongoing. So and it's all data driven. And again, we'll talk about that later on. So again, we've got a very nice pipeline of products which we're rapidly advancing, as I say, getting into the clinical settings. Just to highlight a few here, I'm going to focus today on POLB 001 in particular, and then the two AI programs. I know there's been a lot of questions around those later on, but as you'll see from POLB 001, we started in the severe influenza treatment setting, and then branching out into CAR T-cell therapy, which is a new wave of treatments for cancer, where side effects have these cytokine storms or hypercytic anemia that we believe POLB 001 will play a role. And I'll talk about that later on. Exciting for the company is the completion late last year, of our LPS challenge trial. So this, again, as I say, is getting human clinical data. So I'll talk about, beginning out-licensing discussions there. And then, as I say, the progression that we've made with the AI programs, with lab-based validations already beginning for RSV programs. And then similarly, waiting patiently, having good discussions with our colleagues at Cytoreason about the outputs from the analysis of the influenza data. And again, flagging and highlighting, these are unique data sets. Nobody else has those. So what comes out of this will be unique to Poolbeg, which we will fully own and then be ready for partnering. So thanks, David. On the next slide, then, I just want to talk about POLB 001. Again, a potential blockbuster immunomodulator. And I will say this, that from a severe influenza standpoint, we are driving towards targeting the immune response to the virus. Again, to be clear, not the virus specifically itself. There are antivirals out there that are, needed in the first 48 hours post symptoms, but anything beyond those 48 hours, there's nothing in there for treatment, particularly in severe influenza setting. As you say, we could go beyond. So delighted to have completed our trial last year, looking at the very early data. We were happy to see some of the outputs. And as I say, our statisticians and our clinicians are currently digging into the very large data set. Last week, we got a document over from our clinical trial side of over 500 pages that we're wading through, looking at all of the endpoints on that. So again, very excited what we're seeing so far. And of course, we'll update the market on the outputs from that. And so, we announced it's very early data, but as I say, we're building towards that. On the second front, and I know, Donald, we presented, sorry, Dave, if on the second front, I know that, Donald, we presented to you back in November, and these are all new entities where we have built out, focusing in on POLB 001 in oncology. So again, we know in this CAR-T setting that there's issues around adverse events. So we believe our drug can play a role here. So we file some critical intellectual property to protect these discoveries or inventions, let's say back in January. I'll talk about that a little bit shortly. So moving on, I want to talk about the reason why we feel that POLB 001 will have a role to play across many different diseases. I think this is a key slide to explain that. Again, when we look at P38, which is the target, this is a master regulator of the immune response. And we know that in certain diseases, this goes awry. It gets kind of overactivated, you could say, and causes distress and various sequelae where you have the downstream tissue damage. So you activate the immune cell, and say it's always on patrol. It's always looking for foreign invaders or indeed internal tissue or injury damage, and then mops those up. And it causes, in point 2 there, this kind of cytokine secretions, which is normally, that happens in a normal setting. And this triggers more immune activation and then more cytokine release. And then what happens is this downward spiral where you're getting this breakdown of tissue and organs because there are too many cytokines present. So what we feel that using POLB 001, we know as a master regulator, on the next click, will block that, will block this continuous activation of cytokine storm. So we feel that we've got a very exciting drug here to go, not just on the left-hand side, severe influenza, where again, data generated by our colleagues at hVIVO identified P38 to be a key driver of that progression from mild moderate influenza driven by the virus into severe influenza, where, as you see in point 5 here, is where you have this breakdown of lung tissue and vascular tissue, and you ultimately have a certain portion of patients succumbing to death. So we know that blocking POLB 001 should have a role to play in blocking that. So, and again, other viral infections, there's great potential here as well. I know we're kind of out the other end of the COVID pandemic, but we know there's this cytokine storm issue where the virus triggers the immune system, and then you have downstream damage. So there's other aspects as well. And the bottom one here, the third one, cell therapy. And again, this new CAR-T therapy, as I say, is an interesting, fascinating area, which I'll speak to. But again, there are these adverse events where the immune system is triggered. You want to trigger the immune system to kill the cancer cells, but it goes beyond what's required and causes damage to the other tissue. And this is of concern. So we see there's a window of opportunity here for POLB 001. So I want to talk briefly about the clinical trial that we've just finished, this LPS challenge. And LPS is a modulator of the immune or inflammatory response. And we liken it to mimic what happens in an influenza, an infection or a bacterial infection, for example. So I won't talk through the design itself. I've done that several times before. But essentially, we're looking at 3 different doses of POLB 001 to identify which one is most efficacious in this setting. And I think the initial review that we've seen, again, happily, and this kind of backs up, let's say, previous knowledge, was that it was safe and well tolerated. Again, very important aspect from the clinical trial, that there's no undue side effects in the patients. So we deemed the trial itself to be successful. As I said, we're digging into the lower levels of the data and are very happy what we're seeing so far. We're seeing a marked reduction in both local and systemic inflammatory response. So again, we've given this LPS challenge, under the skin intradermally, and we're seeing that we're blocking that localized response as well as systemic. So this is, again, delighted to see that. We know P38 now is playing a significant role in driving the inflammatory response, and we're blocking that. We're also seeing, quite interestingly, a clear dose-response relationship. What comes out of this trial, we want to understand what dose that we give in the further trials downstream, when we partner the program, and understanding what dose we need to give for severe influenza, for example, or CRS, for example. So again, we're getting a better understanding of the drug and how it's taken in humans, and how to, so the dose downstream will be identified. And again, well tolerated, no serious adverse events. And we will say the full data read about clinical report that will come in Q2, very, very shortly, essentially in Q2. But we're working towards giving a updated of the deeper dive into the data. So very excited about that. So on the next slide, then I'll talk about CAR T, again, a little bit different from the infectious disease, but we know that these kind of inflammatory responses occur in up to 95% of patients that get CAR Ts. And again, a new wave of cancer treatments that are focused on leukemia and lymphoma patients. There is designs to move this into solid tumors as well to have effects there. But what happens is that when you activate what's called the T cells, they again activate their local the immune responses, immune cells driving cytokines. And again, you're having this downward spiral that are serious adverse events with these patients. So we want to block that. And we believe that POLB 001 has a role to play here. So we hope to, we're initiating clinical trial activities in that. And given that we already have phase 1 data from POLB 001, we can move easily quickly into a clinical setting there. So there are current treatments out there that looking at steroids, which again is a blunt approach, anti-interleukin 6, which again, one of these cytokines that are only targeting one cytokine. We feel that POLB 001 can target a lot more, and then focusing on IL-1, a similar approach used off-label. So again, a window of opportunity here for a small molecule pill rather than an injection of antibodies or biologics. And I'll wrap up very quickly just to talk a little bit about our 2 AI programs. Again, very excited how we've moved these forward so rapidly. A lot of time, target discovery, even the drug discovery takes many, many years. And as you see from the bottom of this page here, from signing a deal with 1-3 to analyze our RSV data back in February, by December, we had identified drug candidates that now are moving into lab-based validation. So excited about that. At the top is just identifying there's certain genes that are expressed as the disease progresses. And again, we're identifying some gene expression here that hasn't been done before, hasn't been identified before. So very novel. And then finally, Cytoreason, fantastic partners to work with. They work with the larger biotech companies around Pfizer, Roche, and Merck and Sanofi. But they too are working towards identifying very novel, very exciting targets that nobody else has. Some great discussions recently, which David will talk about with farmers being interested in this data and the outputs from this data. And we'll have full outputs from Cytoreason in Q2 this year. And again, looking for products then to in-license to move forward. So very exciting programs and fantastic for Poolbeg to have moved these forward so rapidly. So that's the general background, the state of play for a couple of our programs. And what I'll do, I'll pass it on to David to give us an update. Again, releasing value through BD, a very important component. And again, delighted David's on board with us. Thanks, David.
Yeah, thank you. I guess I probably have 7 or 8 slides. I keep them relatively prompt based on our timing to date, but what I'm going to cover is 4 things. The first thing I'm going to cover is our operating model. Jeremy may have shared it in the past, but just to refresh for people. The second thing I'm going to cover is why do we partner when we partner? The third is we'll talk about 2 markets of focus for us, not our only areas of focus, but 2 specifically of focus for this call, influenza and RSV. And then I'll talk a little bit around out-licensing and how we're progressing there. So this is a slide highlighting our general operating model. What we're trying to do in essence is accelerate the traditional infectious disease R&D development model, de-risking programs that we can then partner upstream with pharmaceutical companies who they can kind of then process the drug and bring it forward at scale and get the medicines to patients quicker. It's essentially then built on 4 steps. The first is identifying high potential opportunities, i.e. finding problems which we can uniquely solve. I headed up search and evaluation efforts at a pharma company prior to this, so we're well versed in trying to place good bests. I think the second piece then is we're looking to get early meaningful data. We're uniquely positioned to do that due to the fact that we spun out of a human challenge trial company. So we're able to get human challenge data early to de-risk the program. We then look to partner with biotech or pharma at a kind of a pre-phase 2 stage. And then we will reinvest any funds from those deals and structures back into the pipeline. So the question that comes up a lot, or what I've seen to date, is why are we going pre-phase 2? So on the left panel, this is some data I found based on a report from JP Morgan that looks at the type of in-licensing deals big pharma are doing. In many ways, I think our operating model has been ahead of the curve, and we're now seeing in the ecosystem that's kind of catching up. The punchline here is that over 90% of in-licensing deals from pharma companies were pre-phase 2 in 2022. That data is out until Q3. So there is a narrative there, and it very much aligns with our approach. So that is a positive thing for us to see, where we can have complementary skill sets work together to ultimately bring these medicines to patients. Let's start about the markets themselves. So I'll talk briefly around influenza and then RSV, and then we'll go to the out-licensing section. So influenza itself, A lot of therapies out there led by Tamiflu, as most people know, but these are only approved for acute, uncomplicated influenza. So 48 hours after symptoms. So mild, moderate disease. It's about a $2 billion market. Tamiflu is half of that, more or less. But there are a lot of challenges out there on the healthcare system. The burden of flu for the hospital system in the US alone is $11 billion. You'll see two quotes on this slide. One is from the NIH and one is from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, just highlighting the need to be able to manage those severe patients, those patients that are in hospital. And currently there's no approved therapies for those. So we talk about severe influenza itself. If you take influenza, 1 billion cases per year, per annum, 3 to 5 million are severe influenza. Maybe the number is actually undervalued. It can be up to 10 million, and about 650,000 deaths per annum. So this is a challenge. Risk factors are obesity, pregnancy, and any kind of renal or heart disease. You're 8 times more likely to have a stroke if you've got severe influenza or influenza in general, and you're 6 times more likely to have some other cardiovascular challenges. In terms of treatment right now, very limited options. So long duration antivirals, although not approved, are used, and then people are moved on to ventilators. So there is a significant gap here, and we think we're able to address this unmet need and drastically improve the standard of care. Clinical data will drive payer discussions will drive pricing will drive overall value. So I think this is a unique program that we can certainly see advancing towards an indication within or approval within severe influenza. Jeremy also highlighted, though, that we are looking at adjacencies. When the company IPO'd summer 2021, the organization has looked at areas where hyperinflammatory reactions happen and where we can try and address some unmet needs or associated toxicities with that. Severe influenza is what we've led with from an indication perspective, but we've also looked at CAR-T. So these are cancer cell treatments that Jeremy spoke to earlier with that nice graphic. And we think that we have a patent filed, I think it was January this year, in that indication. But we will look beyond that. It's about ultimately liberating the true value of the molecule. So I think it's very exciting that we have preclinical phase 1 and upcoming LPS data in severe influenza, and also we're moving in parallel with oncology and specifically CAR-T therapy. Before we talk about RSV, I know Jeremy then had mentioned AI. There's always a lot of noise about AI. When I think about our AI work, it isn't machine learning. So machine learning to me is faster computers. What we're actually doing is taking information and driving real unique insights, mapping in some cases the course of disease from initiation through to completion. And we use our unique data sets to do that. I have 3 images, kind of our blocks of images on this slide. So the top left is a narrative of what we're trying to do. And the analogy that I've put here is we're trying to identify targets. That's like finding locks for new doors in a disease, screening existing molecules. That might be checking to see what keys are out there that can kind of unlock that challenge. And then finally, looking at compounds or designing the perfect key to solve the problem. So that's a challenge for society. The challenge for the AI providers is actually a lot of the data they get is quite disparate, quite patchy. We have challenge data that is extremely dense and robust. We have 6 gigs of data per patient. This is huge. This is magnitudes above what you would get in the public system. So we're able to take this data, augment it with publicly available literature, and then try and draw meaningful insights with programs around this, drug targets, etc. 2 collaborations, one with 13 Biotech. We have some lab-based validation work ongoing there. And then with CytoReason, we have some work with, again, outputs expected in the first half of this year. So pretty exciting. Because we've talked about influenza, let me just shoot to RSV itself. When you think about respiratory infections, what people worry about are lower respiratory infections. They're a top 5 global killer. And unfortunately, a lot of these respiratory infections have no treatments. You will know influenza is a respiratory infection, but there are 85% are outside of influenza. Influenza specifically only represents 15% of these issues. RSV has come up in the news a bit. It's potentially, particularly a challenge for the elderly and children. So the pediatric market and the older population, about 400,000 hospitalizations in the US. And it's the number one leading cause of hospitalization in new infants. The fact that we're able to take unique data, draw in insights in novel targets, so new genes that haven't been looked at by other pharma companies before, we can probably help in this global fight within this indication. It is also an indication that's getting a lot of interest from big pharma. There are some late stage vaccine programs, phase 3 and beyond, and data here that I'm sharing from Singer Capital is estimating peak sales in the region of $1.5 to $2 billion. So again, blockbuster potential for unique therapies within this space. Finally, on the out-licensing part, as I said, we look to partner pre-phase 2. We think about partners that have complementary skill sets, whether that's market access competencies, commercial competencies, and so on and so forth. And we're open to different types of deals, both global deals or strategic regional deals, and also the structure where we think through with a given partner. So yeah, we're actively having conversations with companies, and I think it'll be an exciting year ahead for us. I think that's probably all I have to say at the time we've got left. But Jeremy, I might hand it over to you for the closing summary slide, if you'd like.
Thank you, David. A bit of a whirlwind, but I think it's good to kind of update. As I say, having David on board is fantastic. But I won't dwell on this too long, Donald, but just flag top left, the near-term value inflection points. As I say, the readout from our LPS challenge study pending very, very soon. Lab-based validation, validating these drugs for RSV. Again, looking at the outputs from influenza, again, unique, just to emphasize that what we'll have, nobody else will have. So obviously we'll be in demand, and discussions ongoing with that. And then the other programs, just touching upon them, that we've got our oral vaccine is funded from the Irish government, thankfully ready to kick off there. Having clinical trial by the end of the year for oral GLP-1. And then is expanding into oncology. So again, getting that early human clinical data is key to us. So I will leave, as I say, I won't carry the other three. I know we've talked about these before, but very exciting time for the company. We've built a fantastic foundation, great team to drive things forward. And again, leaving time for questions. Again, appreciate people attending tonight on a Tuesday evening, but happy to take questions. And again, exciting time for the company and a bright future.
Okay, thank you, Jeremy. That was fantastic. You packed a heck of a lot in there, that's for sure.
There is a lot going on, Donald. There's a lot going on, and again, it's great to kind of give these updates because we're working away in the offices, but it's nice to kind of get out there and share.
It's always good to relate to feedback to the investors. That's what keeps them happy. Tell me a little bit more about the many different diseases that you're targeting with POLB 001. I presume a major target for you must be the oncology aspects. Is it possible to give me more detail as to what might be coming out of, you've given us the initial LPS challenge trial data. Yeah. What might be to come? Is it possible to sort of gaze into the future a little bit for us?
It's a good way to look at it. I mean, there's one way to look at that from 001. We know it's been in phase 1 before with healthy volunteers that it's safe and well tolerated. Now we have this new data, the LPS challenge data, as I say, that we're analyzing. Very happy with what we're seeing. I think when we dig into the details, that we'll announce that, where we know that this can be applied to other diseases where there's that inflammatory response. I say we gave you example, LPS is a surrogate for other inflammatory responses, including severe influenza, but including the response from CAR-T. And as I say, CAR-T is just a wonderful new technology where you're engineering patients' T cells, introducing them or reintroducing them back in to go kill cancer. But what it does in the meantime, it kind of activates other immune cells that then you have these side effects of this cytokine storm. And it happens in a lot of patients. So it's kind of an unwelcome side effect. So we think a complementary, kind of a combination of a CAR-T treatment with POLB 001 will maintain the efficacy of the CAR-T treatments, but also reduce these side effects. So we think that there's a market there for that there'll be a demand to kind of, again, these patients are in a tough situation, so we don't want to make it any worse. So very excited about that. But again, looking beyond that to seeing where else we can apply POLB 001, because I've said many times before, but if you've got what pharma like to see from a partnering standpoint is one drug that works in many different diseases. And we feel that hitting P38 as a target, again, validated target in the inflammatory space will be very exciting for pharma. And now that we have this clinical data to back up our statements, I think that'll be exciting for them.
Okay, quick question for David here. When it comes to out-licensing POLB 001, would you do one licensing deal? across all these different uses?
Good question.
Or several
Yeah.
out-licensing deals to different people?
Typically, yes, good question. Typically, what people do is they do one broad deal, but you can split indications. It just depends. Typically, you will find that a company will want, particularly if they're sizable, so if they're a larger pharma, they have therapeutic expertise across a lot of areas. So they want to potentially test the molecule across a number of indications. But I would be confident even if we just focused on one of these, whether it was severe influenza or oncology or CAR-T specifically, I think they're substantial markets. So we had a slide showing the size of the CAR-T market, and then, severe influenza, there is no approved treatment. There are, 5 million hospitalizations at least. It's not very hard to back into why this would be a blockbuster drug, assuming, very basic pricing. So, yeah.
Do you have any numbers in your head as to what sort of out-licensing deal you might be looking for, as to how much money you'd be happy with coming back in? Or is that a slightly cheeky question to ask?
Yeah, no, I think it's a good question. It's one you always expect, right? It's probably about the total value of the molecule. We will work with companies to see what the optimal structure is, and that's always a conversation between two parties. The finances are really important, but also the right type of partner. When I talk about the right type of partner, having the infrastructure to really have a massive sales force globally, being able to have the market access support to get good pricing on the program, having the clinical expertise, and it's a match of those skill sets. Obviously, our operating model is based on the fact that we do want a healthy upfront, and competitive tension is always good, but that's just part of the overall discussion and something that we're always keeping top of mind as we are talking to partners.
Now, you're talking to partners. Is it possible to sort of give us an insight into where exactly you've got to so far?
Sure.
I think you're talking to.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I think I joined maybe late September. We've met at a number of the partnering conferences, JP Morgan and the others, and we are actively having discussions with companies. So I can't probably share too much, but what I can share, there's a lot of positivity around the operating model, firstly, and then secondly, particularly 001 with this new data reading out soon. So we're having a lot of positive preliminary discussions. I couldn't give you a timing on anything, obviously, but I think it'll be a constructive year ahead. Let's just say it that way.
You're going to be busy.
Diplomatic.
Yeah, one way or the other.
Fantastic. Okay, back to Jeremy.
Yeah.
Let's talk to you about avian flu. We've seen a lot about avian flu in the news recently. You've talked about many different uses for POLB 001. Could you see it being used as a treatment should it move into humans?
Yeah, I mean, that's you see the headlines and you're worried. We've learned lessons, from COVID-19, which is to take these things very seriously, very early on.
Very true.
Yeah, we've always said POLB 001 would be kind of involved in pandemic preparation. It's a shelf-stable product, shelf-stable asset, so we know it'll be there, ready for the next one to come through. The key thing to flag again, as David kind of mentioned, is that this is kind of strain agnostic. It doesn't matter what strain of virus it is. Once you get that inflammatory response, our drug will work. So it doesn't matter. I mean, the avian flu is a H5N1 that they're talking about. It's kind of emerging right now, but irrespective of what strain it is, it's the immune responses that we're tackling. So yes, it could be, again, we hope that, this is not an next pandemic, or kind of advice. We work very closely with Professor Derek Gilroy, who was at our Capital Markets Day, commenting on that, the frequency of these pandemics is actually increasing over time. So we have to be better prepared. So we think POLB 001 can play a role here if need be.
Okay. You didn't mention it in your presentation, Jeremy, but I know you're excited about the potential for the oral GLP-1. So this is a bit of a handbrake turn here, but oral GLP-1 program. Can you tell us a wee bit more about GLP-1?
Handbrake turn, I like that, Donald. Yeah, we saw it as an adjacency. We had an existing collaboration with colleagues at AnaBio around oral vaccines, and they were establishing a program at oral GLP-1. And we saw that there was a good, as I say, synergy between their technology and our expertise. And recent presentation, we had Professor Brendan Buckley, who he's worked in metabolic diseases all his life, and he's very excited about this program. Most diabetics, they get an injection in their arm, but if you could swap that out for an oral drug, that's fantastic. So we're establishing. Actually, I had a call earlier on today with our proposed clinical trial site. Again, we see this as a very rapid approach where we can get data coming out from, say, upwards of 18 patients that we'll investigate. and again, moving on to manufacturing and have data by the end of the year. But again, it's one of these things, if you get positive data from a small clinical trial, early human data, then we know that the pharma is in the GLP-1 space, in the injectable GLP-1 space, will be looking to substitute those with an oral product. So we'd be very excited about that. So again, we'll have rapid, the plan is before the end of the year to have that clinical data in hand from oral GLP-1. Yeah, very excited about that.
Okay, Jeremy, final question. Let's wrap up the news flow that you can expect to the end of the year. You're talking end of year. Let's say news flow to the end of the year. What can we expect?
Yeah, I just kind of touched upon it, but the next key step is, like, as I say, the data set, the more comprehensive data set, let's say, from the LPS challenge trial, which again, David mentioned, will be that springboard for the deeper pharma discussions. So that's pending. As I say, as I write, there was emails going back and forth from statisticians and clinicians, etc. So the real, as I say, digging into that data. So that's the exciting one. And then pushing forward with the AI programs. As I say, the validation from the 1-3, that'll be, that's all kind of in vitro testing, so that'll be relatively rapid, and very excited with our side of reason discussions to see what targets they come out with from this influenza data. And we're incredibly busy, you're right. We're looking again beyond this for more grant applications, pushing other programs forward, as I say, the oral vaccine kicking off. So it'll be a very busy year for Poolbeg, and again, very focused on driving growth, driving value, obviously returning, getting excitement around the share price. Again, we're of late we've seen kind of the uptick of late, even against kind of market trade winds, as it were. But we want to keep that going. As I say, we're excited where we're going. We've excited what we've built, and obviously, with David on board now executing from a deal front, I think we've got all the pieces in place.
Overall, you see it as a positive year ahead.
Absolutely. Even in a kind of a whole market down year last year, we kind of maintained, we did well. And I think it's just executing on a plan, executing on a strategy, and staying focused. And I think we've done a good job of that thus far. And again, it's all data driven. This industry is data driven, and once we have data in hand, that's what pharma gets excited about. So we'll have numerous pieces of data this year to be in discussions with. So again, a busy and exciting year. This is what we get out of bed for. There's patients that need our help, and obviously we want to get our products to the bedside.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for joining us. That's Jeremy Skillington, CEO at Poolbeg Pharma, and joined by his colleague. Poolbeg wanted to get David English in front of you, and we've just done that. David English, VP Business Development at Poolbeg Pharma. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Appreciate it, Donald. Thank you.
Thank you very much.